9th of April, Easter Day. Sermon on Matthew chapter 28, verses 1 to 15, and Psalm 118, verses 22 to 24. On the resurrection of Jesus, our salvation and our faith stands or falls. In this scientific age, when we expect a rational explanation of any event, many are tempted to seek an explanation for the resurrection that does away with any supernatural element. One common conclusion is that Jesus lived on in the hearts and minds of his disciples, and that this is a sufficient foundation for the Christian faith. A few years ago on Easter Day, I preached at a church where one member is an avowed skeptic of anything beyond what might be considered normal experience. He and his wife sat stony-faced throughout my sermon, clearly disagreeing with every word. However, beliefs such as that just will not do. If we believe in a God who had no beginning or end, who made everything that exists, and who can hear each of our prayers, then we already believe something far beyond normal experience. It should not be too much to expect then that such a God could defeat death and rise again. There's more to it than that, though. If Jesus had not risen bodily and visibly on that first Easter Sunday, the first day of the Jewish week, the Christian faith would not exist. It was the disciples who first met with the risen Lord, who saw and touched him, who became the initial witnesses to the rest of the followers. Some found it difficult to believe, but presently Jesus appeared to them too. Eventually, over 200 met with him and were convinced. In our account from Matthew's Gospel, it was Mary Magdalene and another Mary who went to the tomb early in the morning. They witnessed the opening of the tomb by an angel who rolled back the stone. His appearance was such that the guards shook and became catatonic. But the angel reassured the women. He told them that Jesus had risen. His body was no longer in the tomb, but they could see the place where he had lain. He then commissioned them to tell the others, and they set off. Then Jesus himself met with them, and he told them to tell the rest of the disciples to go to Galilee, where he would meet with them. It was on these first few sightings that our faith began. The followers of Jesus must have been convinced of the truth of the resurrection. Theories that they themselves had stolen and hidden the body are absurd. It would have been impossible to get past the guards. But even if they had done so, how long would their faith in Jesus have held if they knew he was dead, that his promises of future life and glory had failed, that all his teaching was in vain? They could not have a dead Messiah. There was nothing to be gained by holding on to their hopes and dreams, unless they had proof that they were true. On the contrary, they faced the prospect of derision, persecution, even death for their stance. And many of the first followers of Jesus, including, it is believed, every one of the apostles, suffered for their faith. Their belief was so strong that they deemed it worth any price. It is because they knew it was true that they believed. Because they believed, they talked. They preached. They taught. They healed. They travelled. They established churches, and the gospel was spread. In their lifetime, they reached most of the known world. Eventually, Christianity reached the farthest shores, all because Jesus is alive. There's also further evidence of the resurrection in our gospel. When the guards recovered consciousness, they went and told the chief priests what had happened. the chief priests should have been furious, and the guards could have expected short shrift. Soldiers were not supposed to lose whatever they'd been guarding. However, the soldiers were bribed with a large sum of money and told to say that Jesus' disciples had come in the night and taken the body while the soldiers were asleep. That's an absurd story. If they were asleep, which they should not have been anyway, how could they see who took away the body? And yet the chief priests preferred that taradiddle to be disseminated, rather than own up to the truth that an angel had opened the tomb and Jesus had risen. Furthermore, they promised to talk the Roman governor round if he heard about it. That little episode is proof enough that the Jewish religious leaders knew that Jesus was alive. They knew he was the Messiah, but they stayed silent. The resurrection is evidence that we have an amazing and powerful God. We see this in Psalm 118. This psalm is often read at Easter and on Palm Sunday because it forms part of the Hallel, a group of psalms of triumph and victory, sung by the Jews particularly at the Passover, when they recalled their escape from Egypt and Pharaoh's tyranny. The psalm concerns an unnamed king who faced defeat from a powerful enemy, but who called upon the Lord and against all expectations was victorious. It's a psalm full of thankfulness and praise for God. The Lord is my strength and my might. He has become my salvation. Echoing Moses' song of victory after the Israelites escaped from the Egyptians at the Red Sea. This unknown king had felt rejected, like a discarded building block. But he had, with his victory, become like a cornerstone for his kingdom. He had expected to die, but instead he lived. However, this psalm had prophetic meaning with a far greater messianic fulfillment. For Jesus had become the ultimate stone, rejected at his death, but who lived to become the cornerstone of God's kingdom and the foundation of our faith. Jesus himself quoted those words to the Pharisees after they had challenged his authority. Peter was later to quote the same words to the assembled religious leaders, and in one of his letters also. Paul acknowledged the significance of those words in relation to Jesus too. The resurrection of Jesus was the ultimate victory. In the resurrection, God revealed his love, power, mercy, and grace to give us an everlasting King who has defeated death and sin and opened the gates of heaven. We need have no doubts. The very fact that we are celebrating Easter today is proof enough that he is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia.